Hi, former Mayor Aaron Householter and former Mayor John Blanchard, coming to you with some more community issues. We've done a few of these videos in the past. We hope to do more, but we're busy guys. You know, retirement has been good to us, so we're staying pretty busy. But we want to take some time to talk about some issues that you may be reading about in the newspaper, or maybe you're not even aware of. So some things that we think might be important for you to know, what really the status of your city is. Also, we get a lot of questions, but we want to just invite you to send any questions. If we're not covering something that you're curious about, feel free to send your questions to either John or myself or Gang of Three Productions, and we'll try and answer those questions for you. Yeah. So, John, where do you want to start today? You've been following. I've been a little busier on a couple of things lately. I haven't been able to follow the city as much. What are kind of the things that are happening right now that you think people would want to know about?
Well, I think as things start to heat up with downtown and things that are going on there, I believe that people are starting to tune in a little bit more. And you know, throughout the process, it kind of went under a lot of people's radars. I mean, everybody had a lot of things going on, and now that the traffic is closed off and people are inconvenienced, and sometimes, you know, they get a little more curious and start paying attention as they start to see streets get torn up and equipment moved around. So kind of focusing a little bit on some of the things that are getting underway, but construction-wise, and we can talk about some of those things. But just really kind of looking out a lot for the fiscal end of things, and how, you know, are these things making money, and are they going to make money, and things like the field house, are they going to draw visitors to downtown? Right.
So some of the big things that happened starting when I first got into city government, and then I think they carried through while you were in office. Of course, special assessments were always a big thing. How our growth was, everybody talking about why don't we have more jobs. The downtown project came along, the river project, remodeling the Bicentennial Center, all happened during that time, the field house. I tend to feel like a lot, Salina has been very short-sighted. I feel like we have a comprehensive plan, but we haven't really followed it. We're not really doing, you know, a comprehensive plan, for those of you who don't know, it's sort of the roadmap for your city to follow. It kind of says, here's where we want to grow in 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, 30 years. Here are the areas of change. When we did our last one, the consultants were very surprised how many people got involved and voiced their thoughts on what was going on. So there wasn't just a handful of people. There was like 500 and some people involved. And that's probably twice what they normally get in a regular community. So there was a lot of community input. 85% of the people polled wanted to see us reuse what we have. So when I went into office, you know, I was following that policy. We also tried to stick a lot to the layouts of the community, like where we put commercial and residential. You know, people are always coming in saying, "Oh, well, I've got this extra piece of land. It's never going to be anything. I want to put this project here." And we have to look down the future and say, I understand you own that property. You feel like this would be a good thing, but we have to look down the road. And if we do this now, then we'll never be able to develop this later, you know. So, and sometimes people don't understand that. So that kind of gets us into special assessments, which was talked about. They just talked about yet again last week at the city commission meeting. Our policy, I mean, you and I feel kind of the same. We've done extensive research on this. Our feelings were always that, look, business should take care of itself. Government shouldn't be in the handout business. Now, I would be the first if we had two big factories come to town or something, we had tons of employers, and we needed people moving to town, and there was no way that our local contractors or construction people or developers, which we really don't have in Salina, could keep pace, then I would understand that. You know, if all of a sudden, I think Winfield or somebody, I never followed up what happened, but I think they got a factory and they needed like, you know, 200 houses or something. You know, we don't expect any one contractor or developer around here to be able to fund that. So, you know, I would probably be the first person to say, okay, yeah, we do have to help them out. We've got to build the streets, you know, and get these going. But these little, you know, 8, 16, 20 house deals never fit into us. Plus all the information that's out there says that we're actually shrinking. we're losing population. And every time the housing and the special assessments are so multi-tiered on how they can hurt your community when that growth isn't needed. Now, again, there may always be a need for new houses, but you and I agreed they should finance it or go to a bank or form a group together to be able to afford this. We really don't feel like the city needs to be funding development into greenfield areas. And going back to talking about our special assessments, or to our comprehensive plan, they're already building in the areas that were called for to not be developed for another 20 years.
Right.
So they don't even follow the patterns. And what that does is it pushes the home values down in all the other neighborhoods. And a typical argument they want to say is, well, nobody wants to fix up a house in those neighborhoods because they don't get their money out of it. Well, that's true. And that in itself is a problem because we're funding the southern development, and it's sort of, I know we had a clear plan. Our plan was fix up what we have from day one. That was our thing. It was maintain the streets, maintain the structures, make it cost effective and worthwhile for people to fix up houses in our downtown core because we knew a downtown project was coming, a river project. It didn't make much sense for us to continue to incentivize southern growth.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. So one of the things that you said just a moment ago is really key, and that is the idea is to instill that idea and facilitate that idea that says we're going to take care of what we already have before we build more.
Right.
Okay, and that was always the plan. Whether it was development policy, community and economic development efforts, anything. What is sustainable, and how do you remain resilient as a community? Because if something happens, if something were to happen in Salina, we aren't resilient enough to rebuild a community in a fashion. We would people would move if we had a tornado or a flood or something other natural. We're going to lose them, and they're never going to come back.
Right.
And so some of those ideas, and so I think probably because people hear special assessments, and most of them don't understand it.
Right.
And I think probably part of the problem that, we had was that we tried to implement a strategy.
Right.
And you and I have talked this before the culture was there.
Right. Well,
we don't have a culture
we should have just
that supports that strategy.
We should have just done this is why we can't have nice things.
Well, that's
instead of trying to explain to people here's what's going on, because people see new housing and they say, oh, look how well we're doing. And what most people don't understand is that there are hundreds and hundreds of studies done that show residential housing costs more than it brings in.
Right. Well, and I think, not to just look at the housing thing,
and the cost
or the economic development thing by themselves, but if you begin to look at all of those in a holistic way, I think you inevitably end up at the conclusion that we need to fix our culture.
Right.
Our culture is not one of let's build things of enduring value. Let's wait and save up and do something. We're always, I want it now, and then I'm going to rush it, and then if it doesn't quite turn out right, then I'm going to abandon it quickly.
Right.
We have a fast food culture, a fast food mentality. Everybody's more concerned about whether or not we have a Panera bread.
Which I eat at, by the way.
Which is fine, and it's fine. I hear they have good bread.
Yeah.
I'm
great bagels.
I'm a Wonder guy.
Yeah.
But, I mourn for the places like Gutierrez.
Of course.
That don't, you know what I mean?
Let's hold off on
I'm just saying, but that's a culture.
Right.
That's a cultural thing where we say we value and we want what everybody else has and what we think everybody else does, instead of having a culture of really having tradition and maintaining value and all of that. And so, Peter Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. And it basically means that unless you have your culture correct, then you can come up with all the great plans, all the great strategies, all the great policies, all the great everything. you can't implement those
Right.
because you don't have that framework of people that get it.
I've always said Salina is like a teenager. It doesn't take care of what it has. It wants what it doesn't have and has no way to pay for it.
And you're not alone. I think that an overwhelming majority of people in town recognize that and
feel
are
that way.
frustrated by it too.
We could always make a special episode on special assessments. We know that that's an area that we've spent a lot of time.
Yeah,
focused on.
we can't fix that until
And you know, we had 3 people just vote on it. One of them's wife is an exclusive realtor for one of the guys who uses the most special assessments.
Yeah.
Another commissioner that voted on it is in the title business, who makes money every time a house sells, and another one had 95% of his donors.
Right, but you know what? I'll tell you.
That shows you kind of where we're at.
You're speaking to what I was getting at.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's our culture.
That's our culture.
That's our culture. So what I'm saying is that we need a cultural shift, and of course we've tried it, and there are other people that are there out there with us. But you know, just for instance, like with that's the difference between, and the headlines in the paper today said it all, is that the new policy that the developers got was the one that they want, and it's good for the developers.
Right.
And it's like, you know, we weren't trying to do policies or anything else that were bad for someone. We were saying our job is to do what's good for the city.
Right.
And so I think what was left out was that it is good for developers.
Sure.
It is good for private interests.
Sure.
But it's not good for the long-term fiscal health.
And it's not good for the people.
It's not good for the long-term fiscal health.
But let's move from that. Let's talk about a few other key things. You know, when we were there, we resurrected the Buy Center. It seems to be doing a little bit better. That was a good example of reuse. When the field house idea came across, I don't know if it was Hardy or whoever else.
I think it was Randall.
And we all kind of said, look, we don't really feel like the downtown is the location. Now, look, nobody's probably been a bigger supporter of downtown than we were. I mean, I think we were the first. Remember when we walked around downtown, we went and met with all the business owners. People were like, we've never had anybody come down and talk to us ever. And, you know, we just wanted to know what's the feel, what would make your life better. You know, simple things like that, asking the people, what is it you need? So, none of them said $150 million downtown. You know, they wanted simple things like get rid of the 2-hour parking. If customers are down here spending money. Simple requests.
No one said bowling alley.
Yeah, nobody said bowling alley, car museum, or field house. So we knew that there was going to be an issue with building the field house where it was. We knew that it was cheap real estate way back when, and that's why they built the hotel there. We were pushing kind of more for a area with plenty of parking and everything, maybe over where the old swimming pool was or some kind of complex. We looked at other areas.
I think there was a real desire to make sure that if the field house was a need for the community, that was a priority for Parks and Recreation and so on, and they kept pointing back to a 1987 study, that we do what they did in 1987, and that is to really look critically at different sites that may be the best for the field house. As it turns out, the reasons why it wasn't a good choice to locate a field house in downtown Salina in 2014 was the same reason it wasn't picked in 1987. So I think some of those things, they were concerned that the site wasn't big enough. There was no ability to expand. You couldn't really park people there conveniently without spending millions of dollars on new parking lots and everything else. Whereas around Kenwood Park and by the Y and some of those things,
that gets us to what most people suspect about Salina, and it seems to be true, and that is that the guy who owned the land was buddies with, other people and the hospital and all these things, and they basically came to us and said, if you don't build it here, we're not going to give you this money or whatever else. Our attitude was like, fine.
I was fine with that.
Who cares? That's fine.
I was fine with that.
The other thing is the cost. I mean, why does Salina spend so much money? $12 million on ours. It's 60,000 square foot. There's no locker rooms. There's hardly any bathrooms there. We won't even get into the construction issues till later. Lawrence, meanwhile, you were telling me built one that was 180,000 square foot?
180,000 square feet.
12 million. And I'm going to guess it's better and doesn't have a lot of cracked concrete.
Actually, they have a lot of cracked concrete.
Oh, they do have a lot of cracked
concrete. Yeah, they do.
Okay, well,
they're
just 180,000 square foot.
Right, they have a little bit more of it. But yeah, in fact, it's funny because as we, recently, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that there's issues with the concrete cracking. at the field house, and it's a mystery apparently.
Right.
Well,
not to the people that poured it one day after it rained.
The interesting thing is from the moment that before that was even built, I was having conversations with the city manager that I was very concerned that there were cracks in the floor. They were not just hairline cracks, and they were getting bigger quick.
Right.
And so, it's all concrete cracks.
Oh, that's what I love.
You know what? Around here it does.
Yeah, around here it does.
But
just while we're on that subject, real quick, I want to jump in. When I was in Oklahoma City in that new area that they have with the rapids and all of that, a thing that I thought we should do around here, and that is. About every 2 panels, the person who laid the concrete, their company logo was there.
Right.
Now, do you think they want cracked concrete with their logo on there?
Well, I don't think they do, but let me just kind of throw this out, is that I'm not ready to place sort of the blame on the contractor, and I'll tell you why.
No, not necessarily.
I'll tell you why, because I went back and I
shared.
It's a bad location. I showed you the article from 1993. I think you showed it to me, and then I pointed out to you, and we kind of shared back and forth.
Yeah, there was a 97 article,
the idea that originally the downtown Hilton was to be built where the parking lot is on Ash and Santa Fe, in that northwest corner. Okay, no, it was supposed to be built there. They determined that property was too expensive.
Right.
Not now, it's a parking lot. And in our big downtown plan, what's it going to be? The most really expensive property? A parking lot.
Right.
Okay. Right. But it was too expensive there. The land was too expensive. So they bought the land. They could get the land over by the railroad.
Cheaper.
And so they made a deal with there. The plan was 7 stories with a rooftop garden.
Right.
Okay. When they got there, they found out that the soil would not, the bearing capacity of the soil wasn't sufficient and suitable for a 7-story building, and all it would hold is a 2-story building. So the bottom line is this: if it can't hold any more than a 2-story motel, that field house is considerably larger than that motel was.
Right.
So I'm not really ready to say that it could be workmanship on the concrete, but just like the subdivisions that are out south that are cracking and stuff, I'm not ready to throw the contractor under the bus for shoddy workmanship because they built these things on clay soil.
Right. Well, and they didn't remediate it correctly.
Right. It's if you don't have a culture that says, hey, if we're going to build here, it's going to necessarily have to be more expensive.
Right.
You just say, no, let's just get it done and move on.
Well, some of my thoughts on that had always been, look, if we're going to give you special assessments, you pay the maintenance on those streets, and you warranty those driveways and sidewalks until those specials are paid off.
Yeah.
I think it's, we can't do that. We can't do. Why? You don't trust your own work? I mean, there's some of that. So let's talk.
Well, I don't think it's that they don't trust their work. I don't think they trust the fact that they can sell those lots.
Well,
that there's a market for the lots.
That's a whole other story. Let's take a look at the downtown project. Now, you and I were big downtown advocates. We've always pushed for it. Our argument has always been: start with minimum maintenance codes. Start with fixing up the houses around downtown. Slowly but surely help those businesses grow. Maybe do some streetscapes and stuff. Ours was a more paced approach. I was sort of
it was incremental.
I was kind of an anti-river guy at first, but then I began to realize the uniqueness that it could offer our community, and I felt like, maybe the river, not to the extent of what they wanted, but getting there and cleaning it out. People like water. I think 80% of the population lives within like 30 minutes of the ocean or an ocean. So people like to be around that. But there were little things that I wanted to do. Light up the top of the United building, which used to be lighted, I believe, when I was still young, still quite a bit younger. But there's a lot of neat buildings downtown that have unique lighting. So, get some lighting down there, get some water, do some things to bring people out, spend a little more money maintaining those businesses. And then all of a sudden this huge project comes along with star bonds and moving businesses downtown and all of these things. And there are a lot of people receiving a lot of subsidies. And the reason I wanted to hold off on some of the things you were saying earlier is I want to touch on the fact that we talk about Salina having this fast food and this chain mentality. And a good example of that are all the subsidies. Now, I do intend to go to the city commission and ask them for a list of where all of that money is going. Look, I think it's only fair if it's a legitimate project and they truly believe in it to spend that kind of money. You better, you better have a passion for it. It better not just be like, oh yeah, I kind of think it's okay. I want to know who's receiving those subsidies. I don't want to hear Lighthouse Properties. I want to hear whoever at 500 North Graves Boulevard or South Graves Boulevard or whatever, whoever that is that's receiving that subsidy and owns that building. I want to know the name of the principals involved in that. I think the citizens of Salina should know who is getting the money, because if somebody donates $1 million to the field house and says, look what a great philanthropist I am for the community, but then turns around and gets $1 million in infrastructure money given back to them for their hotel, and then more money for other projects. It seems to me the taxpayers have been more philanthropical to them than they have been to us. So, I'm not trying to cast anything there. I'm just saying, let's be honest where this money is going and where it's coming from. The thing that I wanted to get to about the fast food mentality is, I'm a big fan of the Scheme. I love the guys at the Cozy's. I know Monty at Blue Sky. I'm not there as often as I am the Scheme and Coops, of course. We've got several pizza places downtown, and the public is starting to talk about this. I'm hearing more and more from people saying, why are we getting another pizza place downtown? And that's before they even realize that we're giving them almost $500,000 in subsidies. Now, I don't ever recall in my time giving Cozy Inn, Scheme, Coops Pizzeria, Blue Sky, and Martinelli's, any of these places, any kind of money, let alone that kind of money. Are we so enamored with a restaurant or a bar that we don't have that we're willing to give $350,000 to them and run our other local businesses out of town?
Well, it goes deeper than that, because it's the thing that I always would bring up. When do you say no?
Right.
Because if you're willing to the very first person, and we're talking about a restaurant that they say is going to do $3.5 million
right.
a year.
When the regular places are only doing... And let's be honest, we love the downtown, but that's a horrible location. They're never going to do that kind of money.
Right. And I don't know, I was never privy to the strategy there, but it seems to me that, one of the things you left out, the bowling alley.
Oh, right. It's
sort of
their
signature dish is a 29-inch pizza.
Right.
Yeah. It's like $40.
Right.
Right. But they're getting $1.5 million too. So we're into subsidizing pizza, apparently.
Right.
And I mean, hey, listen, it's not that I'm anti-big pizza.
Right, yeah.
Right. I love pizza.
Right, yeah.
But it's like, you know what? Here's the thing. Tony's Pizza is out investing millions and paying their employees more
wages.
And doing that. And so far, you know what? Not only did Tony's Pizza not come asking for a handout, they gave us about $1.4 million to name the field house and help out with marketing and some of the other things
field
there.
House, with the
Bicentennial Center. And so, it's like you got to look at like your community partners. And here's the thing. They're not local guys.
Right.
We hear all the time, it's like, oh, they're local guys, they really care about the community. It's like, well, here's the thing. I'm really curious that you mentioned Lighthouse Properties earlier. I'm really curious when Lighthouse Properties purchased the Raphael on Country Club Plaza
in Kansas
City, Missouri, which my guess is going to be, and I hate to, I don't want to insult anybody, but I'm going to guess it's on the order of $12 to $15 million minimum.
Right, hotel
property.
Right.
And I realize they had renovations as well, but I'd be really curious to see what the incentive package they got from Kansas City, Missouri was to buy that hotel.
Country Club Plaza came along and said, we're going to give you some money.
But it kind of said, so it's kind of, it doesn't really, it rings hollow with me for when
has a history of propping up bad business decisions and bad business people.
Well, it's not that it's a fear of saying no.
It's a fear of saying no.
It's a fear of saying this might not be the right fit.
Right.
And it's like going, oh, okay, well, boy, you just told, these really powerful people that, they can't do something. And it's like going, hey, it's not personal.
Right. And, we did it before. There was numerous times where we said no to certain things and the people did it anyway.
Yeah.
It's like they're going to ask.
They're going to do it.
You have a mayor who sits there and says, well, if there's money to give out, I think we should just give it out. Well, look, as a business owner, I've never gone to the city and said, give me three, the amount of inventory I could buy if they did that for me.
Well, the problem is that I think people have blinders on all too often around here because, a lot of people that make decisions like that do have the mentality of, hey, we can afford it.
Right.
And
we can't.
And it's like, there are a lot of people there going it's like going, who's this we?
Right.
Right? It's like, who's this we? I can't afford this. I mean, we have so many people on fixed incomes.
Let's talk about
economics. But you're right. It's a mentality and it's a culture that says, hey, I can afford it, and all the people that I hang around with can afford it. It must be a great idea.
Right.
And that's fine, and that's good, and that's a great business mentality to have. But that's not really the mentality that works when you're dealing with a community.
Right.
Because you have people that can't afford that. You have people, the water bill, people's water bills and stuff this year went up 4%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They think that doesn't affect anybody. That affects a lot of people.
Sure it does.
That affects a lot of people. And, and they go up every year. I mean, we brag about we don't raise taxes, but we do. Every time we raise fees.
Usury fees and everything else.
And all that. Yeah. I mean, we do.
Well, let's talk. I mean, let's try and keep it a little more broad, I guess. We've got about a 21% or 20% poverty rate in Salina.
We're not quite that high anymore. We're at 16.3.
16.3. Okay, that's good news. Okay, that's good news. They must have lowered the poverty rate standards.
Well,
the rest of the world's coming down with us. No. So in our income, you have a current commissioner up there who likes to talk about how we're in the top, third or whatever else, and it turns out we're actually in the lower half.
We're not. We're about 70th.
Is it now? Okay, we were 63rd, something like that.
67.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, McPherson is like, I don't remember, but Ottawa County is like 5 or something.
McPherson's doing well.
They're doing well.
McPherson's doing well.
And so let's just talk about so some of the people at home can get a grasp of what's the debt load that we're carrying currently with the city, because people think we're flush with cash. I know some of the debt when I was in office was quite a bit lower than it is now. One of the things we voted on, I believe you were in office too, was if we're going to spend money anywhere, let's take some money, let's build up our fund balance or our rainy day fund, and let's spend $500,000 more.
Well, we've done that.
Fixing up streets and stuff.
Well, we've done that, and honestly, there's been like huge cash giveaways. We just gave away $500,000 to developers for the Lee building for low-income housing. And I tell you what, the mentality, and we talk about the culture and the mentality, what happened there is that the determination was made that, oh, hey, we're so far behind on this downtown project that the $500,000 that we were setting aside in case our bonds, in case we didn't meet our bond payments.
Yeah, we can just give that away.
We had that there. Oh, hey, we got an extra $500,000 laying around.
So instead,
we don't have any other need for $500,000.
Instead of fixing streets or anything else. So if you ask the average citizen, what's the city responsible for? They're going to tell you the bare bones: streets, police, fire. That maybe parks. It's going to be very minimum. I would guarantee you, when we have a police department that's trying to build a new gun range, and let's face it, they haven't had a lot of new stuff in the years. They get the new cars, but they're in an old building from the 60s. They haven't really had a lot of new stuff, and it's getting harder and harder to recruit law enforcement for our community. So they want to build a gun range. Well, to me, when we're trying to figure out if we have the funding for that, I don't think we should be giving $500,000 away to a housing development. And let's talk about that housing development for a minute. The downtown, we were told, oh, it's going to spur all this growth. It's going to spur all this development. And, there are video and recordings of these people saying this, so we'll eventually bring those back out so people can watch in their own words when they try and deny it, how this is going to be this great thing. Well, if you're having a party like this downtown project, why are you paying people to come to your party? I thought the downtown project was supposed to spur development.
It's supposed to be a catalyst,
so
but apparently
$500,000 free handout, no payback, 20 years of tax abatements on. Now, the argument on their side is, well, nobody's ever going to do anything with the Lee building, so that's money you never would have got. Well, my attitude is, if no one's ever going to do anything with the Lee building, why are we doing it now? Yeah. And why are the taxpayers doing it? Look, I'm not going to deny the fact that I own rental properties and have had other rental properties in the past. And something like that, you're requiring me now to pay taxes to put myself out of business. And you know, the sad thing is last I checked when they were doing this housing project, each unit, and this is income qualified housing, I think at the time, and it may have changed, was about $165,000 per unit.
Well, here's the thing. I believe the price tag they have on it is $14 million.
Okay.
Okay. I could be wrong, but I think they said, "Oh, hey, this is a $14 million deal," and I think it's 50-some units.
Okay.
Okay, so
well,
I mean,
maybe it's a little more, but
yeah.
So when you look at the average home in Salina, it's $120,000, and you have people who are,
and that's for low-income housing.
Yeah, right. No, I forgot. Low-income housing in Salina is $250 and up. Remember? Yeah. Oh no, we mean that's a first-time home. Well, they keep changing.
Oh, that'd be $275. $275. Well, you think it's starter home? We don't want to. We don't want to confuse affordable with low income.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you know, I think when you ask, you know, you look at the average Salina person who's earning lower income than other most other communities in the state.
We're at about 45,000 median income right now, and the state is about 54.
Right.
Yeah, so and national is, we're even below national. The state is below national. We're below the state.
Right. Yeah. So you look at all that, and it seems like, you know, in Salina, it's a typical rich get richer, poor get poorer situation, and what that's very short-sighted, because if you don't have that pool of the middle class and maybe some of the lower income putting that community that money into the community, that's where everything starts failing.
I'll tell you what.
Look, you can't leave whole swaths of town behind like we've done.
Yeah.
You know, who wants to drive through 8 blocks of light to go downtown?
Well, that's what you're going to have to do.
That's what you're going to have to do. Yeah. And look, there's no money to do the, you know, when they begin to fall short on the bonds. And look, what you need to realize is that right now there's X amount of people that are paying for this. And as this debt goes up, and our population goes down, your debt really starts going up. And then it's going to be hard to sell your house when the jobs disappear. You know, it only takes a Phillips or something like that closing to do a rush on houses. When you got people putting 30-year mortgages out there, hardly any money down, and their house, let's say they buy a $200,000 house, now it's worth $160,000. They've lived in it 10 years. They've only paid it down to $170,000.
Hey, but they paid down 10 years of the specials.
Well, I'm saying secondary home, you know, but you know, that's going to hurt. That's really going to hurt. So let's maybe cap up for this show and let people know, what are we looking at as a debt load currently with the city? I don't expect you to know all the numbers, but we talked about that a little bit when I was running.
Well, let me give you a little bit of history, and I'm going to be vague with some numbers here. Okay. In 2008, and this is in the appendix of the 2017 budget.
Okay.
So if you go online and look for the Salina 2017 budget, and you go clear to the back where the appendix are, you can find out where the current indebtedness is of the city. And be careful. I mean, if you have a heart condition, you might want to have the defibrillators nearby so you can get the paddles going. But anyway, it has a part of that in the appendix. It lists our indebtedness, and we have a number of different categories. It's bonded indebtedness, which is our bonds.
Sure.
It's our general obligation notes. And typically, the process is that we have general obligation bonds and revenue bonds.
Right.
An example is that general revenue bonds are pledged and backed by the full faith and credit, which is the property tax.
Right.
Okay, and so, you know, if we have to pay those off, we have to raise your property taxes.
Right.
Okay? The revenue bonds are a little different. The revenue bonds are pledged by revenue from things such as, like, the star bonds will be revenue bonds.
Right.
Sometimes it's like if you build a parking structure and you have a parking authority,
right,
then the parking garage is paid for by the authority and so on with revenue bonds. Most of this, a lot of the stuff at the airport, I think they may use revenue bonds more than your average type
city or something.
But a city uses revenue bonds quite a bit. But the revenue from those activities is what goes to pay for those bonds. So typically there's a fee involved or something else, so that the people that are using it are the ones paying for it. Part of those bonds, though, is that we take out temporary notes from time to time.
Sure.
So there's a bond package of bonded indebtedness, and right now our bonded indebtedness is about $69 million. I think the 2018 budget had about $69 million in bonded indebtedness. Okay, and so here's what that doesn't include. That doesn't include any lease purchase deals that we have going. Like the HVAC at the city and county building and other things like that we buy on a lease purchase option. It doesn't include state loans. For instance, a $32 million water treatment facility, if it's financed through state loans or whatever, or portions of it, those don't show up on your indebtedness. In fact, I don't believe revenue bonds do either. But all that being said, there are a lot of things that go into it. Our current indebtedness is over $100 million. Okay, now the obligated bonds that are backed by the property tax that we talked about earlier, if you go back to 2008, that number was about $31,600,000.
Right. I was going to say, when I was in office, it wasn't near that high.
It's about $31,600,000. In 8-9 years, that has risen to, in 2016, that number was $69 million.
Yeah.
So it more than doubled. Now, here's what that doesn't count. That doesn't count $30 million for a river project that's going to have to be bonded.
Right.
And that doesn't count for the $14 million they've already committed to the streetscape project downtown. And then when you load on revenue bonds on top of that, you start to get a really big picture. And then here's the other bad news.
Let's talk about the infrastructure.
But here's the thing. Let me just finish this. And once we get looking at what the city owes, then you got to look at what all the other taxing entities own. In fact, you have a $110 million school bond project
that's going on.
So your overlap in your community bonding, it matters,
right?
And it adds up.
And again, let's add in our streets, how we're falling behind. Let's add in our
streets are $27 million. Well, probably 30-some million in deferred maintenance right now.
And what are our water and sewer lines?
Forced water mains are a minimum of $114 million in deferred maintenance. Sewer lines, I think you're probably looking $30 to $40 million.
Yeah.
Storm drains, probably $5 to $10 million. I mean,
when you add up the debt in Salina, you're talking almost $500 million.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily.
And I think that's hard for people to understand. $500 million. These are not made-up numbers. These are real numbers that count on your property tax, you buying things, and the current commission, and I know other commissions in the past, they're always putting rosy projections ahead if we do this. A good example was the field house. There was a tournament this weekend. I think you told me there were supposed to be 100 teams there.
Well, there was it was advertised, and it was, hey, we're going to guarantee 4 games per team, and hey, get in because there's a limit of 100 teams.
Right. And how many did they have?
33.
33 teams, right? So when we're already putting rosy estimates, and you and I knew when we got those numbers from the field house,
our parks director at the time said, yeah, we know these are rosy projections. And it's like, at the time, it wasn't a big deal because it was like, okay, well, you spend $4.5 million for a field house, and then if it doesn't quite, those numbers don't quite hit, you still have a field house, and you got it for a decent price, and the community needed it. Well, then they turned around and added all these other expenses on it with, hey, if you build it, we'll do all these other things.
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, well, we'll build it, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, we can't build that unless you give us another $5 million for this and $5 million for that.
Right. A lot of empty
$2 million here, $200,000 here.
And one thing that's being discussed currently, since there isn't enough parking there, is now going across the street, and I don't know if it's the Walkers or who bought the parking lot.
Blue Beacon owns that parking lot.
Okay, so Blue Beacon owns the parking lot and the building that's now the KU Medical Center, which is fantastic. We love having them here. And they obviously sold that to the hospital, probably got their money back out of it. Now they're sitting on this parking lot, And now they're offering it back to the city, saying, "Oh, give us 500, 600, 700,000, whatever."
Well, I don't know.
So now we're providing parking for their building, and if they're such philanthropists, why don't you just give us that parking lot and we'll maintain it for you?
I got to tell you, let me put this into perspective, and I don't think I'm talking out of school. I may be a little, but
and I don't know what the numbers are.
But I got to tell you something. I know that back a while ago, they were kicking around, let's just say this, they were kicking around a number north of $500,000.
For the parking lot.
For the parking lot.
Right.
Okay.
For their idea, for the thing they wanted.
Right.
In the location they had to have.
Right, but let's put this into perspective, okay? That doesn't include paving the parking lot or tearing down the drive-through building or redoing our parking lot or doing anything. No construction. That's just for the land. Now, to put this into perspective, the property that the field house went on was overpriced.
At $650.
At $628.
$628. There you go. And it's a little bit bigger.
And it's 2 acres.
Right.
This thing is 0.6 acres.
Right.
It's not. It's a little
so
over half acre.
It's sort of this whole, look at all the favors we're doing for you.
Well, it's kind of let's get you on the hook, and then we're just going to reel in whatever money we need.
Right.
And then if anybody says no, or like we are criticizing or making fun
which
of it,
is the beauty of our position.
Right. Is then, oh boy, they're just so negative and they're so down and everything, and it's like going, boy, no, I just think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, being a realist is not negative.
Right.
People do, that is one criticism we'll probably get a lot of times, and we may get from our shows, is that we do seem so negative. And the thing about it is, if we didn't have a passion for this community, we didn't care about this community, we wouldn't even be talking about this. The fact is, we don't want to see people taken advantage of. These people need to know where the money's going, who owns what, who stands to benefit from that. Because I assure you it's not the people of Salina. Because the first thing they tell you when you're redoing a downtown or doing a remodeling project, they always say, and I think you may have even told me this, don't do a project based on who you think it's going to bring to town, etc. Do it for the people who already live here.
Right.
We talk about all the time.
That's the number one mistake that people make in redoing their downtowns is they think that if they build it, everybody's going to want to come to their community.
Right.
And they leave out the people that are here. And we have done that.
Right. And they've done. Look, the downtown project, they're putting in everything anybody who didn't really look at our downtown would think that a downtown needs. Oh, here's what we need downtown. We should do this, 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 and this. And they really didn't look at what the true needs of the downtown were. What the needs of Salina were.
They didn't do a planning process. And a planning process would have identified needs and desires from the community, but the community didn't get to listen.
Right.
The private group decided by themselves what was going to go in and where it was going to go.
And who is the private group?
Well, the private group is Salina 2020.
Well, I'm saying, but who are they?
Well, I
mean, we know who some of them are, but why isn't it published out there for everyone to see?
I think that the bowling alley was decided on because they were able to find someone to build a bowling alley on a piece of property they owned.
Right.
I think the hotel was where they wanted to put a hotel, and I think there's probably some sort of partnership with the hospital, and hopefully they're able to
make a go of
lease out enough of that and work. But if you're building a field house or a hotel for a field house,
right,
then it ought to be somewhere near the field house instead of on the other end.
They talk about some of the things at the field house, and we can fall back on that a little bit. At the time, I bet they weren't estimating $3.50 a gallon gas. I bet they weren't estimating that. Look, these people say, "Oh, we take our kids all over all these tournaments and stuff." Well, then that you're not going to take 5 kids or 10 kids or whatever to the Scheme or to Old Chicago or to.
Well, I think they will take them to Old Chicago because they have 100 beers on tap.
Yeah, those young kids will be great. They're going to have like the sack lunches they made, or they're looking for fast food. You know what I mean? They don't really know that set down time, and I'm not saying I don't hope that they don't go to those places. I hope that they do benefit. Because look, it's already built.
Well, here's the thing.
But there was a lot of bad estimates, and no one is driving.
Well, all the estimates they gave also on visitation, and driving hotel numbers were the fact that, hey, all these tournaments are going to be weekend tournaments.
Right.
Well, outside of the one that was this week and maybe one other, they've all been one-day tournaments.
Right.
And most of the teams have been from Great Bend, Hayes. Actually, Hayes sends a lot of teams.
Really?
It's pretty, yeah.
Wonder what that's costing us.
But things like that, Yeah. And so it's people that live close enough that when the games are over at 9 o'clock
Right.
on a Saturday night, they're saying, geez, let's go home. Let's spend the night in our own beds. Let's get up and do whatever we do on Sunday, go to church or play soccer or whatever. And let's have our full Sunday instead of, let's, boy, let's stay in Salina and get up, sleep
spend $180 and wake up the next morning. Yeah,
so I think there's a lot of those things. And so the main concern really, and I don't want to get too far away, and we can really go into depth on our debt snowball.
Shows,
but, my main concern and the reason why I go to meetings and why I write letters and why I do things like we do here and the reason why I think critically, and I think you can be critical without being, people are going to say it's negative or whatever, and that really doesn't bother me. Yeah. But I think if anytime you think and talk and express concerns, if people were confident about their project and about the way it was, it wouldn't bother them at all. They just say, yeah, you know what, we disagree, but they get upset.
Right.
And so
because they know somebody's calling their bluff.
Yeah, so it's kind of, it kind of that in and of itself is kind of, a little, I actually would hope that they would be more confident in the project.
Right, and they're not. And so, look, we probably bored you enough, but hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into a kind of an overall picture. It's a little scatterbrained. That's the way Jon and I work. But feel free to let us know, something you want to know a little bit more about, and we'll plan on doing some. We'll do just a downtown show or just a field house show.
Shoot a question or two or whatever, and if we don't know it, we'll research it and do whatever. And hey, one thing, and I don't know, you mentioned something, we don't have a name for this thing, but if you have a suggestion for that. And the other thing is that, we've been approached by the local Access TV and Salina Media Center, I think they're called now, about doing a regular show over there for them. So if you think that might be a good idea, let us know. We kind of like this format. We love the studio here.
Yeah. And we'll probably be a little more animated and other things, but some shows are going to be more fact-based. We want to give you information. We'll have our fun on some other shows too, and show how ridiculous we can be, and everything else. But we wanted the informative shows. We want to keep a little more straight ahead for you, and be a little more informative, so you can make better choices on how your city's going to go, and hopefully they're helpful for you. And we'll hope to get another show out to you soon.
Right.